We've had a fair amount of discussion during the day about a number of issues, trade, competition, some of those sorts of things. And we do seem to keep coming back to the issue of productivity as one of the abiding problems in the agriculture sector in Australia. So that curve, I'm sure we've all seen it, that suggests that annual productivity growth up to 2000 or so was about between 1.5% and 2.5% per annum, and then since then the best estimate is that somewhere less than 1%, and that obviously has an impact in terms of competitiveness. So we challenged our next four speakers to talk to us about what they see as the likely areas of productivity gain, of real productivity gain, not what we might speculate about, but what they see as the likely real sources of productivity gain over the next 5 to 10 years. So we've got four speakers in this session. Ben Miles, who's the head of Cereal and Seed Care Australia with Syngenta. Professor James Rowe, who's the Chief Executive of the Sheep CRC. John Lloyd, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Horticulture Australia Limited, soon to be Horticulture Australia Innovation Limited. And Michele Giannini, who's the General Manager ANZ for Elanco Animal Health. So our challenge to each of these was, don't talk about theory, tell us exactly how we're going to see some productivity growth over the next 5 to 10 years. So I'll introduce our first speaker with that challenge, and that's Ben Miles from Syngenta Australia Limited. So please welcome Ben.
Thanks very much, Mick. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here this afternoon. What I'd like to do is spend the next 15 minutes giving you a bit of a Syngenta view on life in terms of where we see productivity going over the next 10 years. Perhaps just to create a little bit of context to start with, there's been a lot of talk in recent years about this challenge that we face as a global population around feeding 9 billion people by 2050. And a lot of people are talking about the burden of responsibility that's falling upon growers' shoulders to go and actually deliver the uplift required in production to do that. And so the challenge of driving productivity has never been more real. A lot of focus, of course, around productivity gains focuses on developed worlds, and by providing access to new technologies, to information, and also to more sophisticated value chains, you know, we can see those productivity shifts start to happen. But it's equally as relevant here in Australia, because from our perspective, if we want to be considered into the longer term as a significant player into those premium markets, particularly in Asia, we have to be able to address some of these challenges we see going forward. So whilst the grower is shouldering this burden of responsibility around trying to drive productivity, the world is also getting more complex. And there are 6 elements I'd like to talk about on this slide. It's by no means a complete list, but it gives you a sense of some of the challenges that growers are facing today and going into the future. So let's start with value chains. You know, never before have growers faced so many challenges about getting their products into markets downstream. Because very often the customer that the grower is selling his or her produce to is actually dictating the access to those markets. And very often they will have an influence as well in terms of how those crops are being produced, in terms of chemical residues and other standards that they set. We also see retailers putting their requirements onto the grower to say, well, you know, yes, I want you to deliver what my consumer wants to actually see on the shelf, but I also want you to deliver me longer shelf life so that actually I can maximise my profitability. Moving on to governments and regulators. I mean, governments and regulators take the goal of actually making sure that they can deliver food in a safe manner to their populations. In developed countries, we can see that those food regulations are tightening, and the compliance that's being imposed on growers is getting more stringent. At the same time, we look at emerging markets, and again, they have the same focus, and we've heard about it yesterday with the presentation from Murray Goulburn, and we've heard it today around provenance, around the importance of being able to provide safe food to the consumers and the populations within those countries. Of course, if you're going to drive productivity, very often you have to invest more in what you do. And with investing more in your crops, whether that be in terms of seeds, whether that be in terms of inputs, you're also exposing your business to risk. So again, that makes your world more complex. Then, of course, there's the environmental pressures. You know, there are the things that we talk about that we're well aware of, such as environmental change, such as weather volatility, such as water scarcity, and also land degradation. But there's also the pressures on growers to achieve those productivity gains in a very sustainable manner. Then we move on to societal pressures. You know, we're seeing in developed economies, health awareness amongst consumers, amongst pressure groups and governments is leading to increased government intervention in terms of food consumption patterns. And recently we saw Denmark introduce the first tax on saturated fats. So these again make the grower's life more complex. And then finally, financial instability. Whether it's in commodity prices or whether it's in the availability of credit, you know, financial instability is also making the grower's world a lot more complex. So what I'd now like to do is look at 3 areas that we're working on to try and address that. The first area is around plant breeding. I guess if we look back 20 or 30 years, we can recognise just how far plant breeding has come over the last period of time. In the 90s, there was a big focus on discovering genetic markers that we could use in plant breeding to identify the traits that are really advantageous in terms of plants as they come through. We wind the clock forward to 2000, and those genetic markers which have been discovered are being deployed so that we can better understand the progeny and select the progeny that come out of those crossing programs so that we only select the ones with the desired traits. Where we are today, well, we're in the space of molecular breeding, and we're starting to use a host of different biotechnology tools to help us better predict the kind of progeny we should be selecting. And our view is if we wind the clock forward 10 years, that we'll be in a place where we're taking all the current tools we've got to get today, plus we're using sophisticated computer modelling so that we can better target the outcomes of breeding rather than simply just trying to make lots and lots of crosses in the hope we're going to get the actual outcome we want. Because by doing that, we increase efficiency and we also increase the genetic gains that we can deliver to growers. One of the areas that we're working on very strongly as an organisation is around hybridisation in cereals. Now, hybridisation in cereals is not something new. I mean, we've had programmes in Australia dating back, I believe, as far as the 70s. And we've been active in this space just over 20 years now. And back in the early 2000s, we commercialised our first hybrid barley variety in Europe. And at that point, we suddenly embarked on this huge learning curve because commercialising hybrids at an economic price point is critical, because it's only by doing that can you actually start to develop a broader market acceptance. So wind the clock forward to 2013, and we launch our Hyvido program in Europe. And some of you may have heard about this. But this is the first time that we've seen in Europe a significant step change in the adoption of hybrids. And this has all been down to a number of factors. Firstly, obviously you need the genetic material that's going to give the growers the genetic gains that they're looking for. The second thing is being able to produce, firstly, enough hybrid seed at scale, but also at an economic price point which is going to make it attractive for growers to get involved. Thirdly, it's all about showing the benefits of hybrids in the paddock. And so what the growers are seeing now is that they can reduce seed rates, that hybrids are delivering stronger and more healthy plants, and of course they're also getting yield increases over what they had been doing with conventional varieties. The final thing we did in Europe was we also introduced a cashback yield guarantee, because we recognised that very often one of the barriers is actually purchasing new hybrid seed year on year. And essentially the offer we made to the grower was that if you sign up for our program, and they didn't have to sign up for the program, but if they signed up to the program and the hybrid did not out-yield the best conventional variety in their location in a reference trial site, then we would give them the cost of the seed back. So, you know, what we've seen is that we've made a commitment that if they don't get at least half a tonne, they will get the cost of that seed back. So what I'd like to do now is move on to the second area, which is how we can help plants overcome environmental stresses. There are many different stresses that crops can face, and we recognise many of them, including salinity, lodging, flooding, access to light, poor availability of nutrients, and of course what we class as the big three, which is drought, heat and cold. And all these have got a big impact on growers' productivity. We've calculated that all those stresses together cause losses of somewhere in the region of $200 billion annually. And if you look at the big three of heat, drought and cold, they actually account for about 140 billion of that 200 billion. So really for us, if we can find ways that we can help plants become more productive under environmental stress, then we can start to deliver that productivity lift. Growers have been utilising a number of different techniques over the years to help overcome some of the stresses they face in the environment. Whether it be cultural techniques such as minimum till cultivation to conserve soil moisture, whether it be ways that you can actually better capture moisture in the soil, right the way through to selecting varieties that are best adapted to perform best under that specific environment and under those set of conditions. These are all things that people have been doing. Where we're now focusing is trying to understand how current crop technologies can also help the plant overcome the management of stress on a day-to-day basis. Because if we can make plants manage stress better, we can increase yields, we can improve quality, because that plant has got a better tolerance to that stress. This is the way that we believe we can help growers lift their productivity and also maximise their returns. We're calling this crop enhancement. And what is crop enhancement? Well, crop enhancement really describes us being, or a product being able to manipulate the physiology of the plant, whether it be increasing their roots, whether it be increasing plant vigour, whether it be delaying senescence, or being able to affect the transpiration rate of that plant. What we're now doing as an organisation is focusing more on deepening our understanding of both the primary function of our products, which is generally to kill a weed, to control a disease, or to control an insect, but also the secondary benefits of that product on how it can actually manipulate the plant. For example, we launched Amistar over 20 years ago, and that was delivered to the market primarily to control diseases. However, subsequent research has also showed us that by using Amistar in a certain way, we can have a positive benefit on increasing the biomass of a plant's roots. And by increasing the biomass, you make that plant more efficient to utilise both moisture and also the nutrients available to it. And we believe that if we can enhance the plant, we're going to be able to increase or stabilise the yields that that plant will deliver. We can improve the quality of the subsequent produce, and we can help maximise the use of resources that sit under that plant so that we can get the best return on investment under a wide range of stress conditions. So we've got research underway. We've got over 220 crop enhancement trials taking place at over 75 sites around the world. 60 of those sites we're managing in a way so that we can target a very specific stress. And 15 we've established to be managed environments where we can actually manipulate the environment so that we can actually create a certain level of stress in that crop. In Europe, we've discovered that our SDHI chemistry under drought stress can still deliver yield increases of somewhere in the region of 8 to 12% under severe drought conditions when compared to a standard untreated. And here in Australia, we're working with DAFWA and GRDC to look at how both plant varieties and chemistry can help mitigate some of the factors that can cause We're working with DAFWA and GRDC to look at how crop protection and varieties can help mitigate the damage from frost during flowering and grain fill in cereals. So our hope is that through crop enhancement we can bring lasting benefits to growers, because by doing this we can reduce the cost of producing the crop, we can reduce the risk, importantly, of producing that crop, we increase the output from the crop production, we make it easier to grow and market those crops, and we create opportunities for the grower to achieve a higher price because they're delivering better quality. The third area I'd like to talk about is actually about collaboration. I'm not going to talk about science now, but this is about collaboration. Because as an organisation, we firmly believe that we, nor any organisation around the world, has all the answers. And if we're going to address the challenge that we face, we can only do that by collaborating across a number of boundaries. So we are working with governments, with NGOs and with policymakers to try and make this new vision for agriculture, this more productive agriculture, something that's quite real. We've established strategic collaborations with the World Economic Forum, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the B20 as a way to get broader recognition of the need to develop that collaboration across boundaries and to be able to tackle one of the biggest problems around the world, which is global food security. In R&D, we've we're trying to engage the broader population through our Thought Seeders program, which allows us to crowdsource ideas around and innovative opportunities that we can then bring into research programs. We're working with CIMMIT to share complementary skills and knowledge, and we're working with the International Rice Research Institute so that we can extend technology and knowledge so that we can drive rice productivity and boost food security. We're trying to develop better and safer farming practices. We're working to develop multifunctional field margins through our Operator Pollinator program, which is encouraging growers to create and protect field margins, and by doing so they can actually boost their crop yields and also boost biodiversity in the paddock. We're working with the Fair Labour Association to develop a new approach to tackling child labour in agriculture. And we're working with the Kenyan Horticultural Competitiveness Project to increase profitability and productivity of vegetable farmers in Kenya by giving them access to new technologies, providing training and information, and giving them more market linkages. And then finally, we're starting to engage up and down the food value chain. We want to take a field-to-market approach. We want to create opportunities to improve productivity, to improve the environment and human well-being throughout the agricultural supply chain. Our new coffee program in Brazil is a new business model that's allowing growers to improve their profitability and recognition for delivering higher quality produce. And we've established the Thought for Food Challenge, which is a new initiative that challenges students from leading universities around the world, including here in Australia, to help tackle the world's escalating food issues. And being held accountable to do this is really important to us as well. And in 2013, we launched the Good Growth Plan. Our goal is to increase the average productivity of the world's major crops by 20% without using more land, more water or inputs. That means we will be able to grow more food without increasing the land under cultivation. Yields will increase, but the volume of water used and pesticides won't. We want to make crops more efficient. If we can increase the productivity of these, then we can know that we're going to deliver tangible benefits and make rural communities and lives better. We want to rescue more farmland to help biodiversity flourish. Our goal is to improve the fertility of 10 million hectares of farmland currently on the brink of degradation around the world. And by doing that, we want to support the adoption of practices such as minimum tillage and crop rotation to actually help them do that. We want to boost biodiversity on 5 million hectares of farmland by introducing buffer strips and species protection programs. And finally, we want to improve health and reduce poverty amongst smallholder farmers and also to improve worker safety. Over the next 7 years, our aim is to reach 20 million smallholders to enable them to increase their productivity by 50%. We want to train 20 million farmers, especially in developing countries, on how to use agricultural technology safely. And finally, we want to make sure that every worker who's involved in our supply chain does so in a safe and fair manner. Now, these 6 commitments we want to track as well, and we will have them independently audited on an annual basis so that we can demonstrate the actual outcomes from our actions, and we can also understand the progress versus the plans we've laid out. Thank you.